Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Weather School webinar on spring flying weather, what pilots need to know. Good to see you online. Good to see so many of you watching this evening. Thanks for joining me. The plan is that it's going to be quite a quick webinar. We're probably aiming for about 30 minutes in total, and that includes your questions and answers as well. What I'm going to do is to try and get you thinking in terms of springtime weather and what we're going to be heading into over the coming days. Now that we are headed into these longer days, it's been a beautiful day here in the Midlands today, and no doubt it has with you as well. And kind of just to get you out of that winter frame of mind in terms of flying back into what we are looking forward to as we head into spring. Because, of course, springtime weather is completely different to that we're seeing in the winter. And some of the effects that we get in the spring, we don't see during those winter months. And so what I want to do is just to get you back into the thought process for springtime flying. Now, you can make your comments in the comment box. That would be great to see you saying hello. I can see that a few people have said hello already. We've got Peter Cox, we've got Peter Gristwood. Hello to you, SkyPro. Declan Mooney, hi, Borderless Aviation. Lots of names on there that I recognise, and super to see you there as well. In fact, Peter Gristwood just made this comment that if the wind direction is southeasterly, viz is generally poor in Devon, and that was in response to Peter Cox, who posted that message to say that here in South Devon we get a lot of days when the air is best described as milky. Other days it's gin clear. It's not obvious to me how to predict what it'll be like day to day. Any hints? Absolutely, Peter. I have hints and tips for you on exactly that. So you read my mind. And as we saw from Peter Gristwood there, he said that, yeah, in Devon, with that southeasterly viz is generally poor. So I'll go through that with you. I was actually talking about that at the flying school today. So hopefully I can give you some hints and tips related to that. Now, of course, the webinar is completely free of charge, and that's the reason I'm doing it, is to try and build flight safety. That's the reason Weather School exists, to enhance your flight safety as far as weather is concerned. But this one, I'm asking you if you can donate to the DEC humanitarian appeal for Ukraine. So we've set up a special web page for that. If you can donate whatever you can afford, you don't have to, but if you can, that'd be really appreciated at www.justgiving.com/weather school. You don't need me to go into any details as to why that aid is needed. And I've selected the DEC because it's the Disasters Emergency Committee, and they spread the aid around people who need it. So that's your address there to make your donation. So, of course, you can do that now, or you can do it after the broadcast. So let's get on with it, shall we? And take a look at at spring flying weather for pilots. Now, I'm controlling everything here today, so you are going to have to bear with me because I'm presenter, director, editor, and general dog's body. So you're going to have to bear with me as we go through this webinar. So many of you already know who I am, and some of you will have joined me at the Flyer Club webinar that was done a few weeks ago, where we did some spring weather tips as well. But for those of you who don't, let me just run through quickly why I'm doing this webinar and why you should listen to me, or why you're actually there watching me instead of the other way around. So I'm Dr. Simon Keeling. I'm an absolute weather anorak. Aviation meteorology is my passion. It's my reason for doing meteorology, and I've been fascinated by it since being knee high to a grasshopper. I've been a professional forecaster now for 30 years. Goodness me, where does the time go? So 30 years as a professional forecaster, and I realise every day that I know I have so much more to learn about the weather. Just when you think you've got it nailed, Mother Nature will turn around and bite you in the bum. You realise that you haven't got it nailed. You've got to learn something else. And it's a process. It's an evolving process of knowledge. So there's no way that a forecaster could sit here and kind of espouse knowledge to you and say, well, that's it. That's all you need to know. You know, as pilots, and we particularly see this, don't we, when we're taking off and when we're landing, when the aircraft is being thrown around a bit when we didn't expect it. You as pilots know the weather so well, but you can always gain knowledge exactly the same as I do as a forecaster. Um, I, for my sins, actually went to university for the first time when I was 33 and did a master's degree, and then went on and did a PhD in meteorology. So you can see that I'm a pretty late learner. And I run two weather companies. I run Weather Consultancy Services, which is a private forecasting company. So we provide it to people like emergency insurance companies and people like that. We also provide into individual farmers, right the way through to large agricultural concerns. So a whole range of customers with weather consultancy services, and you kind of see that as weatherweb.net. And I also run Weather School. Now, many of you will already know Weather School. I recognize lots of names there from people who've already been to Weather School. So hello to everybody who's been to Weather School already. You know what it's all about. If you've not been, then go to have a look at weatherschool.co.uk. I run training courses for pilots in taking you beyond the PPL net, that kind of tick box exercise, and get you into thinking really about weather and being able to plan your weather for flying up to 5 days in advance and beyond as well. So go and have a look at weatherschool.co.uk if you've not been there yet. Actually, I've got new course dates announced, which I'm just about to make live, which I'll tell you at the end of the broadcast. So new Weather School online dates for you. Many people have been asking for them. I've finally got them nailed down. So I'll reveal those at the end of the broadcast. Okay, then. Let's have a look at what we're going to take a look at this evening. And the idea is we're going to go through 5 main points as far as our flying weather is concerned going into the springtime. And it's the sort of stuff that I just want you to start thinking about now more getting into spring. Yes, we're expecting the weather to improve. I mean, certainly it's been fantastic out there for many of us today. And in fact, it was great for many of us yesterday. And it will be great for many of us through the course of this week and into the weekend. But things do look like changing during the end of next week and into the early parts of April, which is going to make us think more about weather. So what we're going to go through is fronts in springtime, how they change, how they're different to those fronts that we'll see during the winter months. We're going to talk about visibility. We mentioned visibility briefly a few minutes ago in response to comments that were made. And I'm going to go through what you can expect from visibility as we go into the winter months. We're going to talk about instability as well. Now, don't let that send shivers down your spine as you think about, oh, goodness me, what is instability? What is stable air? I'm going to show you. And we're going to talk about showers and thunderstorms because that's all that instability is. And then we're going to talk thermals. So trying to forecast thermals and bumpy days. And then we're going to talk about sea breezes as well, because many of us finally are going to be able perhaps to go a little bit further afield. I know many people are wanting to do some cross-channel flights. Some of you wanting to fly into Ireland as well, but most wanting to go cross-channel and into Europe. And it just get us thinking about sea breezes and the effects that we're going to feel as we fly abroad. So that is the plan. As I say, I intend to keep it quite short in terms of the actual webinar, but please do feel free to ask questions as we go along. Post your comments on in YouTube. I'm going to see those here, and I'll go through them from time to time. And if you've got any questions, any burning weather questions that you want to ask, please put those in there as well. Just bear with me though, because as I say, I am the presenter, editor, and just about everything else this evening. So bear with me as we go through. Okay, then. So first up, let's take a look at fronts in springtime, what to expect, and how we as forecasters kind of change our views of fronts going into spring. We start to think of them differently to the fronts that we might see across the UK and Ireland and northern parts of Europe through the winter months. So we get a different viewpoint of fronts going into springtime. Excuse me. Now that's a classic chart that I've shown you there of high pressure out towards the west of the country, fronts sinking their way southwards. Just notice the pressure through those fronts. So the isobars joining lines of equal pressure. This one down here, 1,024 millibars. Down here, we've got 1,028, and this one is 1,032. Now, remember, these charts are for sea level. So effectively, what we're looking at there are the QNHs uh, across actually the whole of the chart. So you can see how we're going from high pressure out here to lower pressure out here. And I just want you to bear that in mind. So when we're looking at fronts on a chart, and those of you who've been to weather school will know that that surface chart is the basis of aviation weather part one um, for weather school. And we use that chart all the time because there is so much information on that surface chart that we as pilots can extract. And I think it's really underused because many pilots will just look at that chart and kind of say, yeah, well, I should really understand what the fronts are about. I should really understand what the highs and lows are about, but I really don't. So let's just get my phone out and have a look at the app on my phone. Um, that's not the way that I think we should be viewing these charts. These charts are there to give us extra information, and that's exactly what they do. So, first thing to do when we're looking at those charts, have a look at the pressure numbers. Is pressure rising? Watch those numbers on the chart. Is pressure rising? Is pressure falling? Because fronts don't just exist on their own. They are part of usually areas of low pressure, and they're part of the overall atmospheric process itself. So have a look at what the pressure values are doing on those charts and keep an eye on the numbers. Because don't forget, you can get those forecast charts every single day completely free of charge, going out as far as 4 or 5 days ahead. So they're there for us to use as pilots, and we should make use of them. So have a look at the pressure changes from day to day. What are they actually doing? Remember that the higher the QNH, so the higher the sea level pressure that is shown on those charts, the weaker a front is likely to be. Also, reverse that. The lower the QNH, usually the stronger the front is likely to be. So we can pick out a lot of information about whether a front is likely to be active or whether it's likely to be less active. Now, when we're talking active, what do I mean? Well, by active, I generally think that a front is precipitating. It's doing what it says it's going to do in the textbooks. So it's producing rain. It's reducing visibility. It's got a fairly low cloud base on there. That's what I mean by an active front. An inactive front is one where the rain may be weakening, the cloud base may not be so low, the visibility may be better. But remember that there is no hard and fast rule as far as that is concerned. Um, but I use these terms active and inactive just to give us an indication as to what we might be looking at. So the higher the QNH, usually the weaker the front, the lower the QNH, usually the stronger the front. So if we go back to our chart here and take a look, you can see that these fronts are moving their way southwards. So they're moving southwards through the country. Remember, we said lower pressure was out here, higher pressure out here. And whenever we see a front like this that has the plus symbols through the middle of it, that means that front is getting weaker. I know it's counterintuitive, isn't it? But that means that that front is getting weaker. And you can see that as it's headed in towards the higher pressure here, indeed, the front is getting weaker because that's what's being marked on by a forecaster. Now, like I said, that's not to say it's flyable going through that front, but it's going to be probably far better than it would be if that front were in much lower pressure, let's say of 1,000 or 1,002 millibars or something like that, because it's going through pressure of between 1,024 right the way up here to about 1,033 millibars. That means that front is probably going to be weak. The ones towards the east, so the ones towards lower pressure, are likely to be stronger. So there, we're likely to see lower cloud bases. We're likely to see a deeper cloud. We're likely to see reduced visibility and probably more precipitation. Now, it doesn't always work, but that's usually a really good rule of thumb to use to give us an indication as to how strong a front may be. And one of the questions I get asked regularly at weather school is, how strong will a front be? That's a really good way of working that out. Now, remember that around areas of high pressure, the winds are rotating in a clockwise direction. And around areas of low pressure, the winds are rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. So always remember that. And fronts point in the direction to which they're generally headed. So the triangles that you see on here, the semicircles, they are pointing generally into the direction that the front is heading towards. So the key is watch the numbers, watch for pressure. Is it rising through the front? If it is, that front is likely to get weaker. And because we generally have higher pressure going through springtime into early summer, well, we should do, because we generally have higher pressure than we do in the winter, you will find that those fronts are overall weaker, and you'll see more of those weaker fronts marked on the charts. So that's just a quick glance at fronts for you. Next up, what about visibility? We had some really hazy conditions here today, and um, it was interesting to see how visibility changed during the course of today. And it was a classic day with an easterly wind. And those easterly winds and southeasterly winds, if we get them, can cause problems, which is exactly what we experienced today. So, visibility questions. What should we be asking ourselves about reduced visibility and when visibility is likely to be reduced? Yes, we know that rain, we know that fronts are going to be reducing visibility, but what about other times? Well, high pressure is one of those situations, one of those occasions when we can get a reduction in visibility. You know, we all do it, don't we? We see that big area high pressure building and we think, fantastic, we can crack on. This is just going to be wall to wall flying. That's not always the case, as we know. One of the problems with high pressure as we go into the spring is that we can find mist and fog forming under that area of high pressure. Now, that lifts, and we usually get a clearance about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning of mist and fog having cleared. However, if high pressure stays with us, if there's not much wind around to mix that atmosphere up, then it can be that we stay quite hazy under that area of high pressure. And as a rule of thumb, and this is just a rule of thumb, if we have high pressure over the top of us during the months of March, April, May, or at least up to early May, generally what we find is the first day is very pleasant to be flying in. Not to say it's gin clear, it may well be that we get some cloud, but visibility is normally okay. But by day two, after we've had our first night of mist or fog, it can be that visibility is reduced. So we need to be thinking, if we're on our second day of high pressure being over us, that vis may well be reduced perhaps to 10 to 12 kilometers, something of that order. But by day three, if the high is still over the top of us, we should be expecting that there will be haze. There's an increased risk of an inversion layer. And what an inversion does is it traps air below it. Think of it as a saucepan lid. So it traps air below it. And there is an increased risk of that once we're into day three of an area of high pressure. And then that's when we get our poor slant visibilities. Now, I can speak only too painfully of this today because I was due to be flying. I'm in the circuit doing circuit consolidation, but actually my instructor had been up. Other people have been up as well, and just said that the slant visibility was very poor. So I've been by flying today, but also it was really windy as well. The wind really did get up, so that was binned. But it was the slant visibility today that did for me. Now, something else we need to think of, and this just adds to the problem, is that if we get an easterly wind across the UK, and this was the point that Peter was making, Peter Cox was making, that in South Devon there are lots of days when the air is described as milky, and other days it's gin clear. One of the ways to predict this, Peter, is if you get an east or southeasterly wind, and this is true for anywhere across the UK, but particularly eastern and southern coasts. What happens is that we can pick up quite a bit of pollution off the industrial areas of northern Europe, and that can trap below the inversion layer that pollution, which reduces visibility. But not only that, that can also aid condensation process, which can produce low cloud and also mist across many eastern and southern areas. So that process of that east southeasterly wind can reduce visibility as well. Now, it's something that I speak about at weather school, and we go through the details of it at weather school, as those of you who've been will know. But that easterly wind with higher pressure, normally to the north or to the east of the country, lower pressure to the south, and the east or southeasterly wind is one where we can pretty confidently predict that visibility is going to fall. And again, we can use the rule that day 1 and 2 are usually pretty flyable and pleasant conditions. Not all the time. These are just empirical rules. These are just tools that you can bring out the toolbox to see to use. But day 1, day 2 usually are flyable. But day 3 starts to become a little bit iffy with reduced visibility. But by day 4, visibility is reduced. We often get this low cloud across eastern and southern areas, and things kind of go to pot a little bit with that easterly direction. And on those easterlies, just be careful as well, because they can often be stronger than the forecast would suggest. So just be aware of that. Easterly and southeasterly winds can often be stronger than the forecast is suggesting. So visibility is certainly something we need to be considering. High pressure is the one to be focused on. I have to say that 215 and also the TAPS do a pretty good job of predicting fog, and we're getting better at predicting fog as forecasters now. So next up, third thing I want to look at is instability. Going up, anybody? Um, Instability, whenever we see the term instability, unstable air in the forecast, we need to be thinking of cumulus, cumulonimbus, and showers. This is a great picture that I took across the airfield a few weeks ago. And actually, that central bit there looks like it was trying to actually get a tornado forming in there. You wouldn't want to be flying around that, would you? But that's a great example of unstable air. Now, this time of year in the spring, we get more unstable air. One of the reasons why glider pilots love it. So, what are we thinking about with unstable air? Take it back to your Met PPL days. We're looking at a sharp lapse rate. So, what we're looking for is warm air at the surface, colder air aloft. And it's perfectly possible to do that. Today was a classic example of that, where we had warm air at the surface, temperatures got up to, I think, 19 degrees today. The air aloft is still cool because heat transfer through the atmosphere is actually very poor. So we've got cold air at high levels, warm air at low levels. That was releasing thermals up to about 6,000 feet today. So we got that sharp lapse rate. And despite the top of those thermals being at 6,000 feet, that was the point where we were finding some cumulus cloud forming. It was still possible for some clouds to be generated. But not only that, of course, the thermals produce turbulence, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But if we've got unstable air, what we're going to be looking for is warm air at the surface, cold air at high levels. Typically, this is going to come in on a west or a northwesterly wind. So that's on a polar maritime air mass. That will bring showers. Now, the showers will be heavy, and there's a risk of thunderstorms too on that northwesterly air mass. You know that we talk about air masses in the Met PPL, and probably you do it and then you forget it because it's too much like hard work to try and remember what all of them are. We do talk about them more at weather school, and I give you forecast cloud bases and tops for each of the air masses as well, which suddenly makes them come alive. But if we get a polar maritime air mass on the northwesterly, typical bases 2.5 to 3,000 feet, tops in the spring 15 to 30,000, 15 to 20,000 feet. But the beautiful thing about a polar maritime air mass for us flying in the spring is that we can often fly around the showers. Those beautiful blue skies between the showers. So it's perfectly possible to do that. But we need to be watching out for unstable air. One of the keys to unstable air that you'll spot, one of the clues will be in the taps. That'll be because they'll talk about showers. They may even talk about thunderstorms. But instability, this unstable air, is something that we need to be thinking about more as pilots as we get in towards the spring. So I want you to be asking yourself, is it going to be a warm day at the surface? Is the air at high levels cool? We can tell that if the wind's more west or northwesterly, there is likely to be that sharp lapse rate. In fact, I don't know who the orange god of the skies is, but just a comment that was made here that said at the weekend there was an odd adiabatic lapse rate. I suspect leading to very rough flying around slate, all changed about 3 p.m. But can you explain as to why this would affect flying so much? Um, I'm thinking back to the weekend and what the conditions were like at the weekend. I think, if I'm correct, we had got the start of the high pressure building in, and I think what was happening was that there were there were thermals able to develop uh, on Sunday, I think, particularly. In fact, I'm just going to have a look uh, and just take a peek as to what was happening on Sunday. So if you will just kindly bear with me just a second, let me just have a look at what was happening. Yeah, okay, got it. So it was the start of the area of high pressure. So I think what was happening on Sunday was that we had thermals at low levels. We also had quite a sharp easterly wind, so quite a strong easterly wind. And I think what was happening was that was chopping off the thermals. So we had a lot of wind shift in the low levels, both in direction and in speed. And it was that was generating that very, very rough flying that you talk about here. Um, and I think probably what happened is some cooler air came in later in the afternoon and shut off the thermals, which meant that we were left with just the easterly wind. So that got rid of that gustiness and the horrible conditions that were there due to the thermals being tied into the flow too. I think that was what was going on at the over the weekend. Okay, so back to the plot then. Next up, thermals. I did mention thermals briefly just a moment ago, and well, today was the classic thermal day. Looks something like this outside. Um, Relatively blue skies. We did have some cirrus cloud. We had some altocumulus cloud developing during the afternoon, but we did get thermals. It felt warm, and I don't know about you, but it's the first time that I think that we have really gone outside and felt warm this year. You know, it was a huge, huge difference. My pleasure, orange gold of the sky. It was a huge, huge difference. Um, and to be flying in those thermals certainly throws you around a little bit. Now, it's not a problem, of course. It's nicer if you can expect them. So these are my rules for just thinking about thermals. And generally, thermals occur when we get warm days of 20 degrees Celsius plus. Now, we were quite close to that today, and I have to admit that even at 15 degrees on a day like today, we're going to get thermals if the air is sufficiently dry. And generally, what we're looking for is dew points of 10 degrees Celsius or less. We ideally want a ridge of high pressure because that gives us relatively light winds and fairly clear skies. So we can get heating going on at the surface. So that high pressure is really quite important. The light winds are important too. And just as a rule of thumb, and again, these are just rules of thumb that we as forecasters um, live by. Um, if the temperature's at about 20 degrees, we expect light turbulence. Now, this is relevant for the UK and Ireland. But if the temperature is about 20 degrees Celsius, then expect light turbulence. 25 degrees Celsius, moderate turbulence. 30 degrees Celsius, severe turbulence. Of course, that's heat turbulence. Okay, but those are the kind of rules of thumb that we use. Now, as we found out today, and probably and the day before yesterday as well, you can get turbulence at this time of year lower um, with lower temperatures. So you can be looking at 15 degrees or so if the air is dry enough. But what I'd want you to be looking at is, okay, how dry is the air? How much sunshine is there going to be? What sort of temperatures are we going to look at? So what's the turbulence going to be? And as I say, rule of thumb, 20 degrees light turbulence, 25 degrees is moderate turbulence. And something else to think about thermals as well. And I know that the glider pilots amongst you are thinking about this all the time, but think of the areas you're flying over as well, as far as the where the strongest of the thermals are going to be. Freshly ploughed fields are always going to release strong thermals. Forest areas that are dark, they're always going to release thermals, as are large tarmac areas as well, i.e., runway thresholds. So they're always going to throw us around too. So just think about the temperatures, think about the dryness of the air as far as thermals are concerned. And then finally, coastal flying and thinking about sea breezes. As I say, many of you are going to be wanting to fly abroad this year because we can. So you're going to want to be, I think, flying over coastal areas. And, sea breezes are not on an average day going to cause us too many problems. Yeah, Declan's saying there, a little bit bumpy over North Wales today, about 5,000 feet. Absolutely, Declan. You were getting the effect of the mountains there. So heating of the mountains and uneven heating of the slopes. That was what would have been generating the bumps that you got today. Good to see you, by the way. So yeah, sea breezes don't usually cause us problems with flying, but it's worthwhile knowing that from sort of now on, we can get ourselves in the position where there can sometimes be strong sea breezes, and we can sometimes get what's called a sea breeze front developing. Now, anywhere in the UK experiences a sea breeze. So even where I am in the centre of the country, which I'm 3 miles east of Hackney Green, of Wolverhampton, and even here we get sea breezes. So sea breezes affect all parts of the country. Now, of course, if you're going to be flying close to the coast, an airfield that's close to the coast, it's far more relevant. Um, but as I say, this sea breeze will move its way inland during the course of the day. So, what are we looking for a sea breeze to develop? Well, generally, we need a land sea temperature difference. So, the difference in temperature between the land and the sea of about 5 degrees or more, or yeah, of about 5 degrees, I should say, of about 5 degrees. The higher, the better, as far as the sea breeze is concerned. Um, that enables the air inland to heat and rise. That lowers pressure because imagine that we have these bubbles of air that are just lifting mass with them and lowering the pressure. And as you know, air flows from high to low pressure. So with a higher pressure over the sea, it's the air that's over the sea that then wants to come inland and replace that that's been lost by the rising bubble of warm air over the land. So that is the sea breeze circulation. Now, ideally for a sea breeze to form, we want light winds because if the wind's too strong, it will just destroy that sea breeze circulation. It can't happen. So we want relatively light winds, and by light winds, I mean wind speeds of less than about 10 knots. And that will get that sea breeze circulation working. Now, you need to be aware of sea breezes going into the spring from about 10 o'clock UTC, about 10 o'clock GMT onwards is when we need to be looking for the first sign of a sea breeze. And what will often happen is that the wind at a coastal airfield will shift from blowing off the land, let's say, to blowing off the sea. That's the start of a sea breeze. Now, as I say, normally we won't notice that effect. It'll move inland through the course of the day and it can reach the Midlands here at sort of 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. So it's taken all day to travel that sort of distance. But when we're flying through it, we will feel gusty winds as that sea breeze moves in. Now, not only that, sometimes we can get cloud forming along the coast. And you'll have seen that as that line along the coast on a spring or a summertime day. Behind it is clear, ahead of it over the sea is clear. But there's just that line of cloud. Now, if the conditions are right, we can get something called a sea breeze front, where the cloud grows further, and it can develop a line of thunderstorms or showers. The key to that, to those showers or thunderstorms forming, is again cooler air at higher levels in the atmosphere. So if the overlying winds, and if you look at form 214, which is the upper level wind forecast, if those winds are coming in perhaps from the west or from the northwest or the north, that's a cold direction. So look at what the 10,000-foot winds are doing. If it's coming from that direction, the chances are the area is going to be pretty cool. That will allow the atmosphere to destabilize. And if we get a sea breeze developing, then that will aid the development of the sea breeze front and may bring some afternoon showers. Now, that should be highlighted on the tap for coastal airfields, but it's just something to be aware of. And those showers, the front itself, the sea breeze front, can penetrate quite far inland. So just something to be aware of. They can occur around the coast of the UK, they can occur around the coast of northern France, they can occur just about anywhere. The sea breeze is a fascinating, fascinating phenomena. But you should see it as well, and it should be mentioned. I think I've seen it mentioned on Form 215 if there is going to be anything significant. So those are my tips for springtime flying and what to expect. John Bradbury has just said, I recall flying through Spain on a mega hot day with almost zero thermic turbulence. Was this because the lapse rate was very low? Probably, John. Probably what was happening was that there was probably warm air throughout all levels of the atmosphere. And that means that the thermals just can't get going. So I suspect that's probably what it was. Because, of course, I mean, I've actually been on commercial flights at 38, 39,000 feet across central Spain on hot summer's days. And wow, has it thrown us around. There was no food or drinks there because of the severity of the turbulence. So certainly, yeah, that would be because the air would be really very, very stable. Um, Yeah. Now, if you want to know more about aviation weather, then I've got my aviation weather school part one course. This is the next course. This is online, and these are the dates. So the 14th and 21st of May. The two morning sessions will be from 09:30 to 12:30 hours on the 14th and the 21st of May for Aviation Weather School Part 1. And you can book your place now. Go to weatherschool.co.uk. You find out more information there as well about exactly what we cover at Aviation Weather School. So the idea is to build your confidence in being able to predict the weather yourself and be able to spot weather windows up to 5 days in advance. So, if you're going to go on the trip, if you're going to go abroad, if you're going to do that trip to Latuke and back, to have that confidence to know you can trust the forecast that you're seeing. That's what we try to do at Aviation Weather School. And it runs over these two consecutive um, Saturday mornings. And also, you get a recording of each of the sessions as well for up to a week afterwards. So you can go back and watch them again. But there you go. That's the 14th and the 21st of May. It would be superb to see you there. Okay, let's have a look through some of the comments here. Michael's responded, don't flight the aircraft when it's thermic. Yeah, let the thermals let it do what thermals make it do. You'll soon become more relaxed. That sounds like a pretty darn good plan to me. Jane Giffield said that the Tafts or Watersham and Stansted, the Cav OK. I live halfway between them, and on my bike, I reckon that Viz was 5K, not what I would be keen to fly. That's a difficult one, isn't it, Jane? Really tricky because actually, Cav OK. Am I right that the definition of Cav OK is 5 kilometres plus no cloud? Let me just do a quick look at that because suddenly, or is it 10K? Is it 10K? Yeah, I think it's 10, isn't it? It is, yeah. So you are right, Jane. Absolutely. So if the visit was only 5K, it certainly wasn't Cav OK. Yeah, we weren't here at Hackney Green today. We were at one stage. I would have said we were probably 6 or 7K, and it eventually did improve. It eventually did improve. Um, Ian Hogan says it was very hazy on the east coast today, so only a few circuits for me. Yeah, I like to say I didn't even manage to get up in, so I'm quite envious of you. It became a little bit breezy here. Um, Yeah, and thank you, Tom and Declan. Um, you both said that Cavoke is 10-kilometer plus visibility. Absolutely. If you've got any more questions, please do get them in now. Stick them in the comments, and I'll have a look, and we can try and answer any questions that you may have. Um, Let me just get back to this one where Richard has said, "Am I doing any in-person training at Hatley Green?" I've actually got one place remaining on my next face-to-face course, which is on the 23rd of April. But it's going to be held a few miles away from Hatley Green, at Weather School HQ, in Wombourne, which is WV5 9JD is the postcode. WV5 Whiskey Victor 5 9JD. So it's only a couple of miles away. But I'm going to be doing that, and I've got, as I say, I've got one place left on that course, and then we're going to intersperse the online and the face-to-face course just to see where people's interests are. I know that many of us are desperate to get back to face-to-face, and face-to-face weather school is brilliant fun. Um, the online ones are as well, and I know that for some people the online is easier to attend because obviously you can do it in your PJs from home wherever in the world you may be. The face-to-face is more of a journey for some people. So I'm trying to fit in as many as I can to suit as many as I can. But Richard, you would be more than welcome to come along to Weather School HQ uh, for um, for that face to face. Go and have a look at weatherschool.co.uk and you can do it now. Um, Orange God of the Science, how do we register for the 14th, 21st? Okay, so what you need to do is just go to weatherschool.co.uk. I'll stick that in the comment box there, and I shall share the screen with you. As I say, bear with me. I'm presenting, editing, directing, doing just about everything here tonight. So bear with me just one second. So all you need to do is to go here. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think you might have lost me there, but I'm definitely back. Um, that was our first slip up of the evening, wasn't it? I knew that it was going all far too well. There we go. So that's the Weather School page, Richard. Just go there. If you go to aviation, click on Aviation Weather School live online course, and then all that you need to do, right hand side here, make sure you select the right course, Aviation Weather Part 1 live online. Just click on Book Securely by card or PayPal, and you can book your place there. Okay. Peter Cox says thanks for the missed tips. My pleasure, Peter. Uh, Orange God of the Size, see you on the 14th. Fantastic. See you there. Superb. And Daniel says, have you had a go with Sky Demon Weather? Setting aside the personal minimum settings, modeling appears to be yeah. Okay, Daniel. Long story here, which I will keep very short. I was involved with the development of the Sky Demon weather app that you see. Now, it's very good, and Sky Demon did a really good job with what they put together there. The idea of that is that it is a short-term forecast, but it should never ever be used for a go no go decision because of exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about. So there can be times when, and there were, this happened on Sunday, I spotted it on Sunday as well, was that it was very pessimistic in what it was predicting. It has to be treated very cautiously. Would I go flying based on what that forecasting sky demon is saying? Absolutely no way at all. No way. But to be fair to Sky Demon, that's not what they're expecting you to do either. It's part of the toolbox that's included with Sky Demon. And really what we should all be doing is from the top, Form 215, 214, METARs and TAFs. Then we should be looking at our own interpretation of the weather, the information I give you at weather school, you apply that, you adjust the forecasts, you look at skew-Ts, you look at things like that, and that helps you be able to predict. And really then we come down to Sky Demon and the Sky Demon weather and the information that gives. So a bit of a long-winded way to say to you, Daniel, I would not be relying on Sky Demon weather for flying decisions, and that's not what it's there for. You know, it's METARs. METARs are by far the better way of assessing what current weather conditions are like. What I suspect is that although we're saying there about it being pessimistic, I also think there may well be circumstances where it's optimistic. And I'm concerned because I've had several pilots say to me that they have made a go no go decision based on that information that was on there, and I absolutely know that's not what Sky Demon intended with the weather that's on there. We just need to probably just be better educated, but it's great, isn't it? Because it looks great, so of course it's got to be great. Let's use it, but yeah, we've got to use it with extreme caution. Hopefully that that helps. Philip, great to see you. As always, great presentation, good tips learned. That's fantastic. Really pleased to see that. John Bradbury, Sky Demon, an example of modelling v forecasts interpretation. It is purely well, it's a combination of satellite data and some high resolution model data. So there's no forecaster input into it at all, which is one of the reasons why we have to treat it very carefully. You know, the reason that us guys still exist, us guys and girls still exist, is that there are occasions, and it just happens to be on the most vital occasions, when humans still prove themselves to be better than the models. Models are fantastic, but they don't replace human experience. So yeah, absolutely, John. It is just the Sky Demon weather is just there for information. No better than let's say, or should I say better, no different to looking at the app on your phone. You know, that's that's what it comes down to. Good to see you, Renata. Excellent. I'm pleased that you found that of interest. I did see a question here from Shashi. Hello, Shashi. Good to see you. How can you forecast whether the day will be breezy or not? Okay. Going into spring, Shashi, we can look at how close together the isobars are. So that's a first up. So we can look at how close together those isobars are. And during the when we don't have isobars over us, think about thermals. So if we've got a thermic day such as we have had today, the chances of a strong wind, but gusty winds, so the chances of bigger differences between the mean and the maxes are going to be increased. So today is a classic gusty day. As a rule of thumb, and again, this is a very rough rule of thumb, and I think we spoke about this at weather school, Shashi. As a rule of thumb, for gusts, add 50% onto your mean speeds. There are days when it's going to be way beyond that, but generally, if you add around 50% onto your mean speeds, you're not going to be too far out. So, for example, this afternoon, Haight Green, I think we were 14 knots at one stage, and the gusts were at 20 knots. So, you know, that's getting up there towards that sort of 50%. So if you add 50% onto the mean speed, you're not going to be too far off as far as gusts are concerned. But mainly the way we're forecasting the breeze is to look at the isobars and to use those rules, such as on the southern edge of high pressure, it's going to be breezier. Hope that answers your question. Okay, have we got any more for any more? Anybody? Okay. Can I just then in that case remind you that, and let me just get my screen up here. I'm hoping I don't disappear. No, I haven't disappeared. Can I just remind you a couple of things? First up, Aviation Weather School Part 1 online on the mornings of Saturday the 14th and 21st of May, presented completely live online by me, you lucky thing. So it'd be lovely to see you there. And could I also remind you and ask you to make a donation to the DEC Humanitarian Appeal for Ukraine. That's the address, justgiving.com/weather school. Put what you can in there, please, in the little tip jar. And let's get some funds raised for that very, very worthwhile course. It'll be great to see you at Aviation Weather School Part 1. If you've not been yet, if you have been, it'd be great to see you at Part 2. If you've been to Part 2 as well, it'll be lovely to see you at Part 3. Just seen in Hogan asking a question here as well. Interesting, informative, well presented webinar, Simon. Thank you. Pleasure. What did John say there? That was the one. It seems wind speed strong around high pressure as opposed to low. It's all to do with centripetal forces, John. But what you need to look for is the southern edge of high pressure. So on the southern side of high pressure, the winds often are stronger than in the forecast. But it's all to do with those forces going around the area of high pressure, to do with rotation. But that's the reason why. Okay, and I think have I answered everybody's questions there? Wonderful. Okay, I will be back on Thursday with the Flyer team at 7:30 live on the Flyer stream. So I know that I will see many of you then. Absolutely, Declan. It'd be good to see you. Do part 2. Do part 2, Declan. I think you'll get so much out of that. We cover skew cheese on part 2. I've got an online course on the 2nd and the 9th of April, if I'm right, with part 2. But do that, Declan. You will get so much out of that. Skew teas open up a complete new world to pilots. And if I were doing the design of the PPL course, I'd be putting skew teas in there. And we also look on part 2 at spotting weather windows 10 to 14 days in advance. Now, I know that many of you will say, how on earth can you do that when you can't even get the weather right for today? Actually, you can do it. You can spot windows. You can't say it's going to rain at 2:30 in the afternoon 2 weeks on Thursday. But what you can do is you can spot when higher pressure is going to be building in or when conditions are going to be more suitable for flying. And in fact, this high that we've got over us at the moment was predicted a couple of weeks ago. We spotted it coming. And actually, you could quite easily have said, well, during this week, there will be flying windows and they will probably be better towards the back end of the week. So it is possible to do. So I'll show you how to do that on part 2 as well. But yeah, Declan, be great to do. Of course, you can be great to see it. Of course, you can do the Skew T course online, but see if you can get yourself along to Aviation Weather School part 2. You'll love that. Okay, I think that's just about it. If nobody has any other questions, I will say thank you for joining me this evening. There will be a recording available of this broadcast that will be online very, very soon. And yeah, please do spread the word. Great, Richard. I will see you on the 23rd. You've taken that final place. Yeah, so great to see you. And look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Look forward to seeing you at Aviation Weather School at some time. And if you come up to Hate Me Green, let me know. And if from there, we can grab a coffee. Great to see you, Andy. Thanks again, Michael. Thanks to everybody who's joined me this evening. Please do go and show your support at the justgiving.com/weather school page. And let's see if we can get some funds raised for that incredibly worthwhile cause. And I'll see you on Thursday. Thanks again for joining me. And let me just check. I haven't missed anybody off at all. No, I haven't. So bye for now. See you, folks. Have a great evening.